Hi folks, welcome to another edition of Cabin Life. I'm Glenn.
I'm Maureen.
And today we are talking about buying land in unorganized townships right here in Ontario, Canada.
We'll be addressing questions and talking about things like, are permits required?
And a few other things related to that as well. So let's start off for the newcomers and those not familiar with exactly what is an unorganized township.
Basically, an unorganized township is a township which has no municipal body and it has little or no services.
And the fewer services there are, then generally the lower taxes that there are. The more services that you get, then the more taxes you pay.
Some unorganized townships include services like a fire department, libraries, community centers.
While other unorganized townships may have very little to no services at all, other than perhaps a roads board that takes care of the repairs and maintenance of the local roads.
Let's go inside. It's getting a little chilly out here for me.
Yeah, we'll go in where it's warmer.
Oh, it's nice in here. Most unorganized townships are comprised of more than 50% crown land, nature preserves, and conservation areas. And those are areas where you can enjoy recreation, whether it's hunting or fishing or skidooing or ATVing. Crown land is definitely not up for sale, and you can't build on it.
The other 50% of unorganized townships in general is made up of privately owned land. And sometimes there are portions of a private piece of property that comes up for sale on the market, and you can find those on MLS or realtor.ca and find them online. Quick search will yield some results for you, perhaps, if you search unorganized land and perhaps a township that you're looking at.
There's definitely a lot of variety of private land in unorganized townships to look at, a lot of areas of differing interests. But the ones with the service boards, they may be really attractive to families, that have, especially ones that have children, because you have the community centers, a library, and there's just a lot more to do. But you have the convenience and the niceness of having an unorganized township where there's no rules and you can do what you want.
So if you're interested in purchasing unorganized land, your search generally would start in the North Parry Sound District and search northwards right up to James Bay.
Now, keeping in mind, in that area, there's also organized townships. So remember to do your homework if you want to buy an unorganized township, that's where you look.
The northern part of Ontario is a huge swath of land. So the further north you get, usually the more remote it is and the less services in general that there are. However, the closer that you get to the built up cities that are even in the north, then you may find that some of those unorganized townships actually have quite good services. So each township in its own right is different and unique in itself. So you want to do your research as far as which townships offer which services. Now, there seems to be a mistaken perception by some who think that the words recreational land is synonymous, meaning the same thing as unorganized land, and that's not necessarily the case. Now, while unorganized townships do contain recreational properties, such as and recreational use of land, such as crown land, conservation areas, other wilderness nature preserves, which you can recreate on, there are areas in the unorganized townships which are private land and not necessarily available for public recreation. That would be for your own private recreation when you own that land. So you don't go on private lands because that would be trespassing. Just because it's recreational land doesn't mean it's necessarily unorganized land, and by saying it's unorganized land doesn't mean it's all recreational land.
No, I think where the perception of unorganized areas being recreational areas, I think that comes from back in the past where a lot of the private land in unorganized townships were used for recreational things, like for personal hunting grounds, places where you can go and get away and recreate. And there were few people living there full time, like permanent residents. But now, as time goes on, we're finding like over the last decade or so, more and more people are actually moving to the unorganized areas to set up their permanent homes there.
On a full-time basis with their families.
Now, this brings us to the popular catchphrase, no permit required. Now, depending on the use of the land that you're planning on doing, you may or may not need a permit.
Yeah, for instance, if you're building a dry cabin, a cabin without any running water, no electricity, no amenities or anything, then yeah, you wouldn't need any permits in an unorganized township.
Right. But if you're wanting the conveniences of a flush toilet that flushes into a septic tank and a well that requires a pump with electricity so that you can have running water in your cabin, then you're going to need at least 3 permits.
One for the well, one for your electricity with the ESSA approval, and one for your septic from the Ministry of Environment. And usually you can get the permit from the well by the well driller, and the septic can be taken care of by yourself or by a licensed septic installer, and you make sure that his name is on the application if you fill out the application. And the electrical permit can be done by the electrician who gets the ESSA permit, which is your electrical safety authority. So depending on the unorganized township that you're wanting to build in, you may require a permit depending on the township. So it'd be a good idea to call the local administration office, the planning board, and find out if there are permits that are required for building, if there's any other additional permits as well. And if you can't find an answer there, sometimes it's a good idea to even call the adjacent township to make sure that they're not the ones that are actually handling the permits in an unorganized township, because that is sometimes the case right here in Ontario.
That's true. Let's clear up another assumption about building on land in unorganized townships. The idea that you can build wherever you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just because it's in an unorganized township and no building permits may be required, but that doesn't mean you can necessarily build exactly where you want. It's a good idea to keep in mind that sometimes there are property boundary setbacks. You might want to keep certain buildings away from the boundaries. Also, where you place your septic in relation to where you have your well, there are distances that are required to follow those health and safety guidelines.
Right. And two, when you're looking for a place where you want to put your cabin or your house, you also need to take into consideration your septic and your well, your driveway and anything else, because you may find a beautiful spot with a great view for your house or your cabin and you think that's it. You have to remember, in that area, you have to fit your septic and your well, your driveway, and any other amenities that you need to service your cabin or your house.
So while you can generally build what you want and where you want in the unorganized townships, sometimes there are certain exceptions to the rule. For instance, sometimes the Ministry of Natural Resources has already marked certain lands as restricted for certain uses.
Yes, I was speaking with the local planning board and one of the representatives there, and I was asking a few questions. And I said, what about, can you build anywhere? Like the idea is that you can build anywhere on your property in unorganized areas. And she said, no, that now when the severances are completed, when someone decides they want to sever their land and sell a few pieces of it, that those applications are forwarded to the Ministry of Natural Resources to review. And if they see any reason why a person shouldn't build on a certain area, like if there is a wetland or a naturally sensitive area, they may indicate that those areas are not to be built on.
And you may not be able to build your cabin, cottage, or home right next to on the shoreline. There could be setbacks, and generally, for the most part, there are. Also, where you put your outbuildings, and also where you place certain buildings in relation to, for instance, are there timber rights on the land? Are there mineral rights? That could have a bearing on what buildings you place where, depending on the situation.
And as usual, do your homework, do your due diligence and research so that you know that if you found a property you think is your dream property, that you can do what you want to do on it. For your own health and safety, it's recommended that you follow the guidelines that are set out by the regulators who make these rules. So it's a good idea that when you're looking at property and you're getting serious about putting an offer in, make sure you take a good look at the plan of survey, because those areas that we talked about through the severance process, that the natural resources or other ministers may put restrictions on the land, like environmentally protected areas or wetlands or the shoreline, those will be shown on the plan of survey, so you'll be made aware of that.
Well, that's a lot to think about, and we hope that the points that we've made today have been useful to you and that you found them helpful. And hopefully you'll do your homework and research when you're looking to buy land in unorganized townships. If you found the information helpful, please subscribe, click the like button. We've got more videos like this one coming up, so stay tuned for that. That's all for now. I'm Glenn.
I'm Maureen.
Over now.
Take care.